The Online Safety Act is here, and it is going to destroy the free internet if we don't stop it ASAP. It's rare that I get that extreme about something like this, but it's a really important thing that we jump in front of. I have paid attention to a lot of movements like this in the past, and I got involved in activism for the first time in my life when we were fighting similar things when I was way younger back in college. This is the first time we've had something this potentially damaging in decades, and I am genuinely terrified for what it means for the web. So what is the Online Safety Act, and why am I so upset? Well, aside from the hilariously large cookie banner on the site, because regulations are good, right? I'm rejecting those on principle. And you have to click hide. Oh my God. Okay, I'm going to ignore all of those UX failures and talk about the keeping children safe online goals of the Online Safety Act. This is legislation that's goal is to prevent kids from having access to things that are bad online. Our latest Internet Matters Pulse shows that 3 in 4 children aged 9 to 17 have experienced harm online. Yeah, this is bad. I want to be very clear about this before I tear all of this to shreds. There is real harm happening to kids online, and I'm thankful I grew up when I did, because it is a terrifying world out there. That said, I don't think the solution to kids getting access to things they shouldn't is to make the web less free. I don't think the solution is to just destroy the entire web in the process and force every single company online to implement their own weird, sketchy way of handling ID verification that results in all sorts of hilarious meme solutions. Like, here's somebody who got through the Discord age verification by using Gmod. Oh man, there is so much to go into here. I have a lot of thoughts, and I've been feeling a lot of pain. And since I'm not selling casinos to 15-year-olds, someone's got to cover the bill. So quick word from today's sponsor, and then I'll break it all down. It's never been a better time to be a dev, but it's also never been harder to find good resources. Now that the entire internet is covered in AI slop tutorials that won't teach you anything, how do you make sure you're getting the right resources and learning from good people? Today's sponsor is here to help out, because Front-End Masters is what it says in the title. Okay, kind of, because they have masters in everything from front-end to back-end to servers to infra and so much more. But the important piece here is that their experts aren't just random tutorial churning people. These are experts that are talking from experience at their actual jobs. We're talking about people like David, who created XState, doing a tutorial about state in React. People like Primeagen. Okay, Primeagen might not be an expert, but you get the idea. People like Richard Feldman, who built a whole new IDE from scratch in Rust. Yes, Zed is really, really cool. And you can learn from the people who built it. Kevin Powell, the CSS expert. I honestly probably should take this one. I suck at CSS. And if you're really trying to rush to get a job, the Enterprise Java with Spring Boot course by Josh over at Broadcom is about as enterprisey as you can get. The range and depth of courses is unmatched. Getting this all for one subscription that you can probably get paid for by your employer is insane. And either way, you can get 25% off if you check them out today at soidev.link/masters. As I mentioned before, there have been a lot of things similar to this in the past. The one I was most involved in is SOPA, which was the Stop Online Piracy Act. SOPA was an absolute disaster. There was a lot of weird plans as part of SOPA, including banning advertisers from working on sites that might be hosting infringing content. So if somebody posted an illegal copy of a scene from a movie on Twitter, they wouldn't be allowed to work with advertisers. And search engines that link would also have legal repercussions for it. This would mean that everything gets tainted down the path. So if there's something infringing at any point, everything touching it is now also illegal and can also be sued. This was an attempt at companies that owned a lot of copywritten material, like big music labels, movie distributors, all of those types of people, to just handicap the internet so they could keep their existing channels of distribution. And this was an absolute disaster. There have been things like this forever. I just got a fun fact from chat. The "you wouldn't download a car" anti-piracy ad used a pirated font. Beautiful. The best part, though, by far with SOPA is that it would have required internet service providers to ban websites as ordered by the copyright holders. So if I had released a song and someone posted it on Twitter and I didn't want them to, I could go to Comcast and say, hey, you need to ban Twitter because someone put my song on it. Absolute disaster. This would have entirely destroyed the free internet. I'm so thankful that we as a entire internet community rallied so hard against this that it didn't happen. All of Reddit did a blackout. Wikipedia did a blackout. A ton of different websites took their pages down for a day, or at the very least did some crazy fancy animation telling people to contact their member of Congress to say, don't push this. And thankfully, it got shut down, largely in part to a group that is very important for keeping the internet free, the EFF. The EFF is one of those rare groups that I am almost always aligned with 100% of the time. The EFF is they're good people. The EFF was essential in protecting net neutrality in particular, which is essential to the internet working the way it does today. Imagine that Comcast, as your internet provider, doesn't want Netflix to be a successful business. Maybe they have their own competitor for Netflix. Maybe when you subscribe to them, they'll give you unlimited access to theirs, but they restrict your data capacity for Netflix so heavily that Netflix only works for like one show and then you're out of data. But you can keep using theirs unlimited. This idea that different traffic could be prioritized or used in different ways, and that your internet provider could choose and pick what internet isn't allowed through, and also double charge. Like they charge you $60 a month for the internet, and they charge the company like Netflix a ton of money to send the traffic as well. The idea that net neutrality could be eroded would absolutely destroy the marketplace, which sucks because the internet is largely a monopolistic business because you only have 1 to 2 options for your home ISP. Imagine that your water company could charge you more money for using different accessories with your water. If they could charge more for one type of shower than another, and then they also sold showers. That's obviously something bad to do as a monopoly because you only have one option for how you get water to your house. So if they sell you a different shower head and charge you less money for using that than if you bring your own, why would you ever bring your own? Even if it's the same amount of water, they're providing the same thing and it costs them the same amount. If they arbitrarily make their thing cheaper because they're a monopoly, you only can use them as an option, every other business gets fucked. And with something as important as the internet, that does not work. We need net neutrality. I will continue fighting hard for this at every opportunity I get. This is what makes the internet the open platform that it is. And it's why I can be here talking to all of you today. So if the EFF is coming out and making a statement this bold, not even saying that this is a bad piece of legislation, they're specifically saying it doesn't actually make children safer online, we have to read it because they're not just saying this. So let's dig into what the EFF has to say. Young people should be able to access information, speak to each other in the world, play games, and express themselves online without the government making decisions about what speech is permissible. But in one of the latest misguided attempts to protect children online, internet users of all ages in the UK are being forced to prove their age before they can access millions of websites under the country's Online Safety Act. The legislation attempts to make the UK the safest place in the world to be online by placing a duty of care on online platforms to protect their users from harmful content. It mandates that any site accessible in the UK, including social media, search engines, music sites, and adult content providers, enforce age checks to prevent children from seeing harmful content. That is defined in 3 categories, and a failure to comply could result in fines up to 10% of global revenue or the courts blocking the service. Not viable. Not viable at all. Obviously, the primary focus is pornographic content as well as things that encourage self-harm. But there are other types of content that they consider harmful to children. Content that is abusive on the basis of race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, content that incites hatred against people for the base of those things, content that encourages, promotes, or provides instruction for serious violence against a person, bullying content. Sure, that one's not going to be abused. Content which depicts serious violence against or gravely depicts serious injury to a person or animal, whether real or fictional. Content that encourages, promotes, or provides instruction for stunts and challenges that are highly likely to result in serious injury. Oh, is my Instagram going to get limited because I skateboard? Is the Braille skateboarding tutorial page going to be banned? It probably should be because of the Scientology aspect, but the fucking teaching kids how to skate part, no. This is like, I can't believe this affects skateboarding. It legitimately does. Oh man. And then content that encourages the self-administration of harmful substances. So all McDonald's ads are banned too. And then there's non-designated content that is harmful to children as well. Content is NDC if it presents a material risk of significant harm to an appreciable number of children in the UK, provided the risk of harm does not flow from any of the following: the content's potential financial impact, the safety or quality of goods featured, or the way in which the service featured in the content may be performed. Online service providers must make a judgment about whether the content they host is harmful to children, and if so, address the risk by implementing a number of measures, which include but are not limited to robust age checks, which are not done at the government level, by the way. This isn't the government providing some solution for verifying someone's age. This is, if you don't do it yourself, you'll lose 10% of your global revenue. Which means a bunch of companies, many of which don't have any concept of safe data practices, are all of a sudden being forced to set up a system for submitting an ID. The place you go to jerk off should not be the place you go to send your ID to. Obviously. Duh. We've seen what happens with this, with the fucking tea leaks. None of these companies have any idea how to keep their data safe, especially if it's never been their job before. Most of these companies are focused on how do we get as much content out for as cheap as possible, not how do we make sure these things are really well secured. How do you think this is going to go? If services have minimum age requirements and they're not using a highly effective age assurance to prevent children under age of using the service, they should assume that younger children are on the service and take appropriate steps to protect them from the harm. To do this, all users on sites that host this content must verify their age, for example, by uploading a form of ID like a passport, taking a face selfie or video to facilitate age assurance through third-party services, or by giving permission for the age check service, access information from your bank to confirm whether you're over 18. Yeah, let me sign into a random porn site with my bank. That's a great idea. They're also required to have safer algorithms. Services will be expected to configure their algorithms to ensure children are not presented with the most harmful content and the appropriate action to prevent them from other harmful content. Do you think these companies even understand how their algorithms work, much less have the ability to tune it that well? No. An effective moderation. All services must have content moderation systems in place to take swift action against content harmful to children when they become aware of it. Since these measures took effect in late July, social media platforms like Reddit, Blue Sky, Discord, and X have all introduced age checks to block children from seeing harmful content on their sites. Porn sites as well have had to implement age assurance checks on their sites, now asking users to either upload government-issued ID, provide an email address for technology to analyze other online services where it's been used, or submit their information to a third-party vendor for age verification. Sites like Spotify are also requiring users to submit face scans to third-party digital identity companies like Yoti to access content that's labeled 18+. Ofcom, which oversees implementations of the OSA, the Online Safety Act, went further by sending letters to try to enforce the UK legislation on US-based companies like the right-wing platform Gab. I want to see this letter. Here's the UK sending a letter to Gab letting them know that they are potentially violating the law. The purpose of the Online Safety Act is to protect the United Kingdom users of the internet services from content that's illegal in the UK or potentially harmful to UK children. The Act requires that services with links to the UK take action to protect users based in the UK. It does not require them to take action or retaliation to the users based anywhere else in the world. As set out in our letter dated on the 26th of March, we have launched an enforcement program to monitor whether the providers of regulated services across the sector have complied with their duty to complete and keep a record of an illegal content risk assessment in accordance with the Act. Apparently, Gab is now being forced to send the record of the illegal content. The deadline is April 2025. What happens if I fail to respond to the notice? Failure to comply with the notice may result in Ofcom taking enforcement action against you, such as requiring you to take certain steps to comply and/or imposing a financial penalty, up to whichever is greater, of £18 million, or in certain circumstances, 10% of the person's qualifying worldwide revenue. A daily rate penalty may also be applied in addition to a fixed rate penalty. What a threat. This is absolutely fucking insane and needs to be wiped off of the planet ASAP. The UK must do better. Back to the EFF coverage, because this is actual good information. The UK is not alone in pursuing such a misguided approach to protecting children online. The US Supreme Court recently paved the way for states to require websites to check the ages of users before allowing them access to graphical sexual materials. This is bad for a ton of reasons. Just like on the implementation side, if 15 different states add this and they all add it in different ways, managing all of that becomes terrible as the hosts of these services. If I have to handle 72 different weird age requirements with their own specific expectations and things across 15 different states and a bunch of random European countries, this just makes building significantly harder, and the chance that you're actually following all the rules near zero. Even if hypothetically this was a good idea, that level of implementation, like friction, makes it bad. But the fact that it's actually just bad legislation on top of that makes it even more reason to not do it. Apparently, Australia is also banning youth under the age of 16 from accessing social media, which means that if you're using any social media, you'll have to verify with an ID of some form, or you won't be able to use it, simply because they want to keep kids off entirely. Oh boy. The UK's scramble to find an effective age verification method shows us that there isn't one, and that it's high time for politicians to take that seriously. The Online Safety Act is a threat to the privacy of users. It restricts free expression by arbitrating speech online, and it exposes users to algorithmic discrimination through face checks, and it leaves millions of people without a personal device or form of ID excluded from accessing the internet. And to top it all off, UK internet users are sending a very clear message that they do not want anything to do with the censorship regime. Just days after the checks came into effect, VPN apps became the most downloaded on Apple's App Store in the UK, and a petition calling for the repeal of the Online Safety Act recently hit more than 400,000 signatures. Yeah, the only winners of this bullshit are VPN companies and identity providers. If your business sells people access to other people's internet connections, or if your business sells ID to Thumbs Up, you can make a lot of money off of this bullshit. Everyone else in the world is worse off. Oh, also identity thieves. That's a good point too, chat. Identity thieves have a lot to get from here too. And if this becomes normalized, that to see content you have to verify using your ID, imagine someone phishes you by sending you a link to something, and you're just so used to giving it your ID or giving it your face that you do, I can now steal your information really easily. For no reason in particular, I want to bring up this fun parody site, usetheirID.com. This is totally parody and definitely shouldn't be used when you need to submit ID verification anywhere. But if you're in the UK and you do need to, hypothetically, if you just want a fun joke to post, totally a joke, you could enter your UK postcode and it will make a fake license for your local MP for that region. If you want to see what their ID might look like, you can use this to do that. And you totally shouldn't use this to get around these things. As they say here, it's useful given the recent Online Safety Act, which would otherwise require you to send your ID to a foreign identity or use a VPN. It is satire, though, so it can't be used for anything. Don't use it, but it's funny, right? Definitely don't go to use-their-id.com if you're in the UK and need to get around these ID checks. Here's an example of what this ID would look like. That's totally not something you could use to submit for one of these. As it says, this is satire. The internet must remain a place where all voices can be heard, free from discrimination or censorship by government agencies. If the UK really wants to achieve its goal of being the safest place in the world to go online, it must lead the way in introducing policies that actually protect all users, including children, rather than pushing the enforcement of legislation that harms the very people it was meant to protect. Love it. As always, the EFF killed it here. I want to go a little more into the details. Because if we want to protect the kids, we have to start by picking who protects. The first layer of who should be protecting the kids, obviously it's their parents. Their parents should be closely monitoring what their kids are doing and getting into online, and going out of their way to make sure that their kids' internet access and way of going across the web is limited in scope to things that are less likely to be harmful. But for many reasons, parents can't do this, because parents are not always technically competent. And there are lots of kids that understand how to go around the web and use computers way better than their parents do. I know I was debugging my parents' computers when I was like 10 years old, helping them with stuff. So what is the next layer? Apparently the government. But do we actually think the government understands these things better? No, because they also offload their responsibility to the platforms. Here's the problem. It's the parents' responsibility, but they don't want to take the fall. So they go to the government and say, hey, you need to fix this. And the government goes, okay, then we need the platforms to fix it. Everyone is eschewing the responsibility. But here's where things start to get fucky. Once we start going down this path, it keeps going because the platforms can't possibly implement all of this themselves. They might try, and then the developers have to deal with it. So the dev for the platform has to implement the things to keep it safe because the parents were too lazy to keep track of things. And some developers will do this right, many will do it wrong, and they'll do it in ways that increase the harm beyond the harm of like giving kids access to things they shouldn't see. And then this goes down to these third-party identity providers if the devs don't try and roll it themselves. Now let's look at this list a bit differently. Instead of it just being who is responsible, think of this as who is harmed if they fail their responsibility. If the parents fail, the kid gets screwed. And that's not good. Like, it's not good that kids are seeing things they shouldn't online. The damage that that can do is hard to put into words. It's not an okay thing. And even if we go with their numbers of like 3 of 4 see things that they shouldn't online, that's bad. That's really bad. But it is still just kids. What happens if the government gets it wrong? If the government gets it wrong, it could destroy the web. Because if they build an implementation for protecting the kids that makes it too hard for us to browse, use, and distribute things on the web, the damage now goes way beyond kids seeing things that they shouldn't. It can also harm the web in its entirety and may not even help those kids in the first place. What happens if the platforms get it wrong because of the legislation the government puts in? The platforms get it wrong, info leaks. It'll suddenly become really, really easy for data that people shouldn't have access to be distributed. You should be incredibly careful with photos of your ID. And if you want to be anonymous online, you should be very careful with photos of yourself in general. All of a sudden, to be able to post at all, you have to identify yourself. What? That is obviously a terrible thing. Thankfully, if this leak occurs here or here, the scope of it will be limited to however many people verified on the given platform or through the pipeline that the given developer had. Thankfully, when the T leak happened, the T is the weird dating reviewing guys app that we talked about before and how damaging that all was. That leak is restricted to the people who had registered on the platform before a certain date in 2024. That's a bad leak, but it is a small scope. But if one of these third-party identity providers gets compromised, lots of info leaks. And this is the problem. There is basically no layer here that doesn't do more damage if it fails. By continuing to shift the responsibility down the pipe, we are increasing the potential harm for when it goes wrong. Because right now, when parents do a bad job of protecting their kids, the kids sees things that they shouldn't. If the government does a bad job of helping the parents protect their kids, it could destroy the open internet. If the platform does a bad job of verifying the kids using the rules the government gave them, personal info starts to leak. And if they rely on a third party so they can get back to doing their fucking jobs, lots of info can leak. And as Chad is correctly pointing out, if it can go wrong, it will. And it abso-fucking-lutely will. We have massively increased the surface area for info leaks. We've massively increased the opportunity and the surface area of identity attacks and identity theft in general. And we've made the internet less free. And we've made it way harder to share information. And we gave a ton of money to VPN companies for no fucking reason. We don't need VPNs. Most people should not be using a VPN. Suddenly we have to. This is terrible. This is so bad. And we need to jump in front of it as aggressively as we can, especially since there's a similar act that's about to go live in the entirety of the EU by around this time next year. This shit is terrible. It doesn't help anyone because, as we saw, all it takes is a Gmod video in order to get around it. So any motivated enough kid is going to do it. And once they've done it once, they're past everything now. This does nothing. This causes way more problems than it solves. And it is bad legislation trying to solve a problem that parents need to deal with themselves. If we wanted to do this right, there are ways to do this. If someone was to propose legislation that was a fund to create educational resources to teach parents about how to protect their kids online, I'd be smiling and waving at it. I would not be against this in the slightest. Even if they went a step further and required a certain level of sophistication in the hardware devices that kids are using to navigate the web so that parents can put more restrictions on those devices, maybe they have some legislation that forces screen time to actually fucking work on iPhones, that I would even consider getting behind depending on how well it was written. Making it so parents can do a better job protecting their kids is something I'm absolutely in favor of. Allowing parents to continue being incompetent in hopes that these random platforms will protect people's info well is not the solution to fucking anything. Especially when you consider all of the sketchy shit that's happened with the same youth demographic when it comes to VPNs. Facebook used to pay teens $20 a month to use their VPN because they would track all of the data and all of the things they did. Now they don't even have to charge. Now you can make a VPN for kids and give it out for free, get way more info than you have any right to access, and do way sketchier things with the data that these kids have so that they can get around the VPN. Isn't that great? If you were a really, really bad faith person that wants to track a bunch of sketchy shit the kids do, you just got handed the ultimate gift from the UK government. This is terrifying. There is no world in which this does what it's supposed to without causing a ton of damage. I understand the desire to protect kids online. There is real harm going on here, but you can't put the cat back in the bag. Like, it's happened. It's here. The internet's not going anywhere. We can't just snap our fingers and fix it or expect every platform on the internet to solve this problem ourselves. This comes down to parents. And we also don't do this anywhere else in the world. McDonald's is really harmful for your health if overconsumed. We don't make you ID when you go to a McDonald's. And I would imagine anyone proposing that legislation we made fun of endlessly for it because it's obviously dumb. That said, we do fund education both for kids and for parents about healthy diets in order to make it more likely that kids eat healthily. It's absolutely fine to fund education materials and try to create a new culture through teaching people what is and isn't safe. We cannot just blindly do this way. It makes no sense. It causes endless harm. It's going to result in another level of identity theft like we've never fucking seen. This is bad. And if you live in the UK or the EU, you should be spamming every government official you can about how fucking bad this is and the potential damage it can do. The EFF has also put up their comments on the social media bans that are being proposed in the EU right now, and they are similarly damning. The Digital Service Act acknowledges that there's an inherent tension between ensuring a minor's privacy and requiring platforms to know the age of every user. Even though it acknowledges it, it does not resolve the tension. Rather, it states that service providers should not be incentivized to collect the age of the users, and Article 28 makes a point of not requiring services providers to collect and process additional data to assess whether a user is underage. Thus, the question of age checks is key to understanding the obligations of online platforms to safeguard minors online. All methods for conducting age checks come with serious drawbacks. Approaches to verify a user's age generally involve some form of government-issued ID document, which millions of people in Europe, including migrants, members of marginalized groups, and unhoused people, exchange students, refugees, and tourists, may not have. Other age assurance methods, like biometric age estimation based on email addresses, or other user activity, involve the process of vast amounts of personal and sensitive data, usually in the hands of third parties. Beyond being potentially exposed to discrimination and erroneous estimations, users are asked to trust platforms in transparent supply chains and hope for the best. The opaque nature of these supply chains is the scariest part. You don't know where your fucking info is going or where it will be stored. Age assurance methods always impact the rights of children and teenagers, their right to privacy and data protection, free expression, information, and participation, as well as everyone else, because we still have to have our age verified too if we're older. Apparently, in this legislation, they've been dancing around the idea of enforcing age verification. They go from it shouldn't be necessary and privacy is important to, depending on the potential harm, it should be enforced if the risks cannot be mitigated by other less intrusive measures as effectively as by access restrictions supported by age verification. This view risks establishing a broad legal mandate for age verification measures. And this is also an important point. By banning a particularly vulnerable group of users from accessing platforms, the providers themselves are left off the hook. If it's enough for a platform like Instagram or TikTok to implement an age restriction tool, there's no incentive for them to actually make the product and features safer for young people. If the government says you have to keep these kids from accessing, and then they do it, they can stop making the product safer beyond that point entirely because the responsibility's off them. Banning a certain user group changes nothing about problematic privacy practices, insufficient content moderation, or business models based on the exploitation of people's attention and data. And assuming the teenagers will always find ways to circumvent age restrictions, they will. The ones that do will be left without any protection or age-appropriate experiences. Yep. Thank you again, EFF, for writing something very important about a thing that's very bad. If you are in the UK, please sign this. The link will be in the description. This needs to be repealed ASAP. Apparently, the UK's also been considering regulating McDonald's ads too. Jesus fucking Christ. I think I've said all I have to on this one. The idea of a bunch of kids starting to use VPNs that are sketchy to get around these workarounds, or platforms no longer trying to protect users because they'd rather just put on the age check and move on from it. None of this is good. There is no path I can see that leads to this resulting in the goals that they have with the legislation, and I see far more paths that cause way more harm than it currently exists. We do need to protect the kids. We need to educate parents on how to protect their kids, but we do not need bullshit like this to destroy the internet as we know it today. You do not want these companies managing your IDs, and you do not want random third parties doing it either, and you absolutely do not want all your traffic going through random sketchy VPNs tracking everything you do. None of this is good. None of this will work, and we need to stop it before it goes any further. If you are in one of the affected regions, contact your government representatives ASAP. We need to stop this before it gets worse. That's all I have to say, and until next time, keep the internet free.